summer school. I'm part of the global movement of Economy of Francisco. It started by Pope Francis. And within there's we talk about integral ecology and ecology of sustainability and all that. But I teach spirituality and spiritual capital, and how spirituality is the basis of we being part of nature. So
including Ruby will be useful for that. I was wondering whether to include also my other my son and my daughter-in-law, but I think we'll leave them.
So I would ask you questions about, especially based on that, like you centrate what role spirituality plays, especially when you started off Tayyib Farm.
Yeah, that's great. So I think I can manage to handle that. Okay. That's good. So if you pop your shoes off here, we'll go in the front room.
Welcome to our next talk under the series of God-conscious organizations. Today I am sitting at a farm in Oxfordshire and I have Dr. Lutfi here with me. This is the first Tayyib, not just halal, farm in the UK. And I want to ask Dr. Radwan about what was his inspiration behind it, especially when we talk about Tayyib is a lifestyle. Thank you so much for inviting us here.
That's okay. Thank
So
you.
tell us what inspired you to start this farm.
The inspiration probably comes from many directions, but certainly at the heart of it was my understanding of Islam's relationship with the environment. Though with a very rural background in many respects in London. I grew up in North London, Finchley, but we were forever cycling out of London. There was no M25 to contend with, so we would go out towards St Albans and just explore the countryside. And even Finchley Barnet seemed quite rural back in the day. Now it's probably a bit more urbanised. And a great inspiration came from my mother, who really encouraged that. She was always a lover of nature, an artist, and would take us on holidays in the back of a van up to Newcastle, where she came from. So I had a great connection growing up really with nature. And I felt when I started to look for a spiritual path and followed Islam, I didn't really see any great change. I felt that it seamlessly followed into my understanding in a deeper sense of our place in the universe, our relationship to the rest of creation and to the Creator. So I think that was at the heart of it.
Is this fine line where people can think, when we say we're part of nature, all is God and pantheism and Spinoza and all that nature, we are all part of nature. How do we then distinguish, or how do you distinguish that? What was the difference when you converted to Islam? And does it really matter? Is it, because Aqidah, as we say, Islam is, we follow a different Aqidah. Is there really any distinction here?
I think there isn't, in the sense that increasingly in the times we live in, that it is very confused what one should believe, what is belief, what is the correct path. And Muslim communities in many respects are also degraded and have often accumulated a lot of ideas and practices which don't really set us apart from the non-Muslim communities. So I do like to stress on the farm that we encourage building bridges, working with any communities who are doing the right thing, and I think that's really important. We had a multi-faith hedgerow we planted on the farm. It was a medieval hedgerow that we reintroduced onto the farm, which is part of what we're doing, is to create an environment here much closer to how it would have been pre-industrialization. And that was attended by Jews, Muslims and Christians. It was a wonderful experience. We actually had 2 Jewish visitors who were from Israel and had been on the West Bank replanting olive groves. And they'd learnt a simple prayer, Ya Allah, Ya Basitu, Ya Qabid, oh God, the one who can give life and take life. This was the prayer that the Palestinian farmers said on each olive tree that they then planted with the Palestinians. And they came all the way to Oxfordshire, taught us the prayer, and then we, Muslim, Jew and Christian, said the same prayer on our hedgerow. So it's a lovely story, but showing that, those who are motivated by the right principles from whatever background they come from, we should work with them in this day and age, when it's not always clear who is doing the right thing. Come back to the purity of the Aqidah, the ideas of what Islam brings. I think personally, I feel very strongly that Islam is the clearest statement of an environmental ethic that you can get within any religion. The monotheism of Islam, where we don't identify God as a particular anthropomorphic or particular feature, characteristic that we can describe. We know that Allah is the one that we can't describe, as it tells us in the Quran, Lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. There's no likeness unto him. So we're told instead to look for signs of Allah in nature. So we're directed in a way to actually look at the rest of creation as a source of inspiration and as a source of recognizing that one creator. But I could go on. The Quran then goes on very much to actually encourage us.
This is why I have come all this way to hear you.
Well, as an environmental ethic, you know, that's the ground stuff of it, that we are part of that creation from the one. We all share that Ruh Allah, that breath of Allah running through creation.
Yes.
But what distinguishes mankind from the rest of that creation is sentience, the ability to make choice, free will, moral choice. And we need to be careful there, because the Quran reminds us we're not always the best of creation.
Yes.
Allah says He made us the best, but allowed us also to go to the lowest of that creation. So the distinction is whether we exercise that free will, whether we make moral choices. And the term khilafah springs to mind in the Quran. We're reminded very much that we have this role as stewards for the rest of that creation. So in a sense, it's a simple ethic, but it's very well encapsulated, I think, in the Quran, and that's sort of motivated what we try to do here. I mean, it's the sort of walk gently on the earth idea, but if you're looking for a religion that embodies that unequivocally and in a very simple, straightforward form, I think Islam does provide a lot of guidance to help us in this difficult times. There is a verse as well which is very prophetic for the times we live in, which I think is in Surah Al-Furqan. If I can paraphrase the English, it uses the word fasad, which can be translated as pollution but also corruption. So it has this idea of
fitna, and
it has the dual idea of the actual environmental pollution, but also this terrible facade idea of corruption and moral corruption. So that the verse goes, pollution and corruption has appeared upon the land and the seas as a result of the hands of man's own actions, in order that they might return back to the right path. They might see the consequences and return to the right path. So pollution and corruption on the land and the seas can't fail to sort of resonate with anyone now when we look at the oceans of pollution, but also the social and moral injustice of the prevailing capitalist, internationalist sort of systems that are creating the social injustice. So it's the sort of the two horns of environmental pollution, but also social corruption that are driving the current crisis that we're living through. And Islam, I would argue, addresses both.
That's beautiful. But do you think the spirit is lost now?
The spirit is recovered.
I'm saying this because, look, you are the only farm in the whole of UK here. And we have many halal, other organizations and halal butchers and all that. Why hasn't your farm or your the whole philosophy hasn't been replicated anywhere? So what is the reason? Do you propagate that as well?
I think, I don't know if we're the only ones, in a way we're recreating a traditional lifestyle. I would hope if you venture into some villages in the Punjab or in the Yemen or in other rural parts of the Muslim world, you would still find people connected very much to their livelihoods and trying to plot a path which would emulate the sort of things we're trying to do. So I think that's there. But I think it's also true that as a community we've lost the plot. As a global community, but also as part of a world that's in a similar position. So when we look at halal, for most people it's just a flashing neon sign in your local kebab shop. And we're all very happy when we hear that Nando's is halal, even though, of course, it's factory farmed, animal cruelty, chemical pollution, a whole raft of awful things. But as long as it's got that flashing sign, we dash to it. And of course, everyone's talking about the halal dollar now as if it's some sort of global market that can be exploited.
Halal water as well. That,
Right.
I mean, we just make fun of ourselves anyways.
It is a shame, but then
Yeah.
we're just part of the world. And I did start by saying it can be recovered. I think people can recover that connection very quickly. We do hope that we provide an education in that when people visit us here, they're exposed to it, and an experiential sort of experience is the best way to actually recognize the forces of nature around us, the signs of Allah.
Action learning.
Yeah, and we would get people who come here and they leave at the end of the day and say that they feel inspired and transformed.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think that's easily done. We need to start turning the tide. It is sad that it's not coming from on high, of course, so we need to actually start at the grassroots and work our way up through the community. And it's always harder because every step you take, you feel that you're pushed back a few steps.
I think it's pertinent to our time as well, especially when, you know, there's a lot of noise about what role Muslims have played or have we contributed to the societies, especially the European and Western societies we are part of. So I think we need to sort of start this conversation amongst our youth especially, so they understand that it's not only about having your professional city jobs, there's more to it.
Absolutely.
And I do get sometimes challenged by my colleagues, and they would ask me, what are Muslims inventing? You know, where are those innovations or inventions? And I try to look for those and, you know, just shine some light on. I mean, everybody knows about you, but I just wanted to have a deeper conversation.
Yeah.
Hi, Ruby. Thanks for joining us. We have Ruby here now, but let me just finish with Dr. Lutfi, and then we'll come to Ruby and ask her questions. So, Lutfi, I was asking you about this general consensus that the halal way, the Muslim halal way of slaughtering animal is cruel. What do you have to say about that?
That's really a misunderstanding of what the halal way is, and that's two parts really. The Muslim community have misunderstood, as in our earlier discussion we were saying we've sort of lost our way in terms of what the real meaning of halal is, the wider dimensions. So many in the Muslim community have reduced the halal to the slaughter process, and for them it simply means killing an animal by the incision and saying a prayer over the animal. That's part of it, but it's the final step. And that's sort of been picked on by the non-Muslim critics of Islam and of the halal process. And they also focus just on that final part. Ironically, that is the same whether it's a halal abattoir or non-halal abattoir. They're actually often killing in the same process. Bleeding an animal is the standard way that animals are killed in the UK. If you are killing an animal, that will be the way it's killed, halal or non-halal. So it's a bit of a non-question really. It's misunderstood. As I say, amongst Muslims, we should have this broader understanding that halal is about the life as well as the death. And with the non-Muslim community, they should recognise that any animal that's killed is killed. And by and large, in UK, under UK existing law, animals are killed by incision and bleeding. For a Muslim, of course, the important part is the mindfulness. The prayer is not just a matter of words, but it's a process of mindfulness at the point of slaughter, that we're aware we're taking a life. And there are a whole set of conditions that should be met in terms of welfare, the calmness of the animal, and those standards sadly are not met in the mass slaughter, whether it's halal or non-halal. So it's really confusing. It's a sort of matrix really, where we have different aspects to it. But on one side you've supposedly got Muslims, but they're in a bunch with the mass slaughter, the industrialized process, bad welfare, etc. And then on the other side you've got also Muslims, people like ourselves, doing small-scale slaughter, sensitive to the animal, caring for the welfare, rearing the animals well. And along with us are many non-Muslim organic farmers and farmers who are actually taking those issues responsibly. So we're dividing the cake the wrong way often. The Sun newspaper would like to divide it as halal is bad and everyone else is probably good, but of course they're misunderstanding the reality of modern production. And many Muslims, we look at non-Muslims and think whatever they're doing might not be acceptable, but actually many of them are doing much better than us and producing in a healthy and natural way. So really, we
I
all
think
need to study more.
I think they primarily focus or refer to stunning the animal first, which I think we don't do.
No, that's a misunderstanding.
Again.
I think the last figure was 98% of halal meat uses a pre-stun. None of the ulama have said that stunning would be forbidden.
Right.
I think obviously if an animal dies from something like an impact or whatever, that would not be the halal way. But stunning, which pacifies, is actually practiced in 98% of the cases of halal slaughter in the UK in the abattoirs. So no, there are a lot of misunderstandings around that. We try and sidestep those issues in that we're not defending mass slaughter, we're not defending this or that position. We simply do what we can on the farm to ensure that the animals are reared in a humane way. The welfare at the point of slaughter is under our own hands, under our own supervision, and that we're mindful at the point of slaughter. So we try and do what we do right. The bigger debate, I think people need to know what they're talking about.
It's true, and I think you are playing that, you are educating people about this,
We
right?
do try
Because
very
you
hard,
do have
yes.
retreats here.
We have open days visits,
Open days.
group visits, and we do have our own on-farm abattoir, so we're quite happy to talk about the process that we do and how we manage things. As I say,
Great.
I'm not defending any other examples in the broader industry, because a lot of it really is very bad and we need to be aware of.
3 months.
That's all right. So now we turn to Ruby. Thank you for joining us. So the main question that I asked Lutfi as well was, what role spirituality plays in what you are doing here? How is this different? So let's have a feminine perspective.
How is it different from other jobs?
Yeah, other farming.
Other farms?
Yeah,
Um,
because this is a Tayyib Halal or Tayyib farm,
yes.
if we have that tag.
Yeah.
So
yes.
from your perspective.
Yeah. I think the focus on Tayyib for us, like most people, has been started with food, so consumption. And although it appears that that sort of margin is just about food, if you actually think about how essential food is for life, for our life and all life, then you start to sort of connect all the dots and realise that it's a much more holistic picture when you talk about food. It's not just about your personal health, it's health of your family, your children and everyone, and then, it's the health of the planet, because without, healthy soils, you're not going to have food. And of course, if you're eating animals, then you're talking about the healthy animals. So food is actually sounds insignificant. It's just about having a quick lunch, but it's not.
Yeah.
And then you move into the social realm, which is growing things together, looking after animals together. Lutfi and I work hard here, but we're not the only ones. We have quite a lot of people, including family, who work on the farm. So it's a social enterprise, and that's really important if we're going to the effects of social degradation or a society that's not Tayyib socially, not healthy. So yeah, I can go on for a very long time starting
That's
to
all
draw
right.
all those connections. So in terms of how were we different, I suppose the sort of farming we do, we had actually a group yesterday from Reading University who were here, and they were being introduced to the farm and our ideas, and we had a feedback at the end, and one of them said they felt like they'd just gone back in time coming on our farm, but in a really good way, because it wasn't back in time as if negative and backwards, but much more productive, real, lively, connected.
And holistic as well, as you said.
Exactly, to nature, and the number of people working here was really, it was really sort of stimulating. The different characters doing different things on the farm, and it's not like being in an office. There it goes. Every 15 minutes we're going to get a ding dong.
That's okay.
Yeah, so it's not like being in an office where you have a very narrow type of interaction with your colleagues, but you're out working, doing all sorts of different jobs.
One with nature as
Yeah,
well.
there's such a variety of things that you need to do on the farm. And I think being connected to, because you asked about spirituality, being connected to nature, I think, helps one understand or brings one a little bit closer to their spiritual nature, because it's not just about the physical reality, because if you just focus on the physical reality, it can get quite depressing because, okay, you never stop working, so you're always at it, and the income's never going to be that great, and things are always going wrong, so that's not so nice. But then you start to realise that it's actually a lot more than this. What's going on, you're doing something really positive in terms of environment. Again, socially, it's very positive. You're helping a lot of people, actually, who don't want to be stuck in an office. And they want to be here because it doesn't pay well. So your people are here because they want to be here.
So you're just tilling the garden, as they say. That is the spiritual aspect as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on.
You depend on nature or the divine to, maybe
Absolutely,
grow.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's not in our hands.
Yeah.
So you think that when people come and visit, do you also impart this knowledge to them in that way? Because now I'm saying this, many people do not even talk about spirituality, or spirituality is actually considered very woo-woo stuff, So do you also talk about these things to them?
I think so. I think a lot of people don't talk about spirituality because we use that word in a very narrow way, thinking it's to do with a religion or just religion. And we have people visiting from different backgrounds, different religions, or no religion. So it's quite, it's not really challenging to talk about spirituality, and everyone sort of connects because it's a reality. It is the reality that we live. So everyone feels something. Well, actually, most people that come here just talk about a feeling they have of peacefulness. So I suppose that's how they're connecting spiritually to the environment that we've been trying to create here, a sense of peacefulness and appreciation of, what exists.
I'm working with a colleague, and he's written a book on animals in Islam and the rights of animals in Islam. And I was asking him the question that, I don't actually see in most Muslim countries, we don't even see that in practice. So do you have anything to say about that? We have all those golden rules and scripture, everything, but it's kind of lost.
Yes, I think we're just trying to put that into practice, I suppose. And again, that is the feedback that we get from visitors on the farm, that they can see that we're doing what they're learning in theory. So we're all reading about it and writing about it, and Lutfi probably mentioned the Ikhwan.
I didn't know you could mention that story.
Right, so the story written by the Ikhwan Safa, which was a group of very spiritual Muslims back in the 11th century, I think, that wrote about animal rights, really, something that I think probably in our present Muslim countries would be very confusing. Animal rights, I mean, they have a right. So back in the 11th century, there was this group that wrote about the rights of animals, of all animals, not just farm animals, just all animals, the rights of nature in a way. So we're reinventing or rewriting the same thing. And I suppose what Lutfi and I are trying to do now, or have been doing for the last 20 years, is put that into practice, because we all, as Muslims and non-Muslims, if we're told that, we would absolutely accept that animals have rights at a theoretical level, but we would still eat industrial meat and industrial vegetables, and separate the actual animal in front of us, which is a lovely little lamb or a very cute, chick, from the fact that we eat them. So if you had this lovely pet in front of you, we often have people saying, I've got this lovely cockerel or whatever, and would you take it on the farm? And one of the first things we say is, we might kill it and eat it. And it sounds barbaric, but when we have to stop eating animals if we're not going to accept that eating animals is actually killing and eating the most beautiful and cute, animals. And that's quite difficult for people to accept.
Yes.
And if people started to be so blunt about it, I suppose, like I have been right just now, we may reduce animal consumption and therefore reduce animal abuse and therefore allow the animals to have their God-given rights that we have taken away from them.
Yes.
So, so that's what we're trying to do, I suppose, just slowly take steps towards putting those things into practice.
I was sharing with Nabil that when I was in Africa, in Zimbabwe especially, they have totem, right? So they have like zebra, they have elephant, lion, monkey. And I asked my colleague, no lamb or sheep or chicken? He said, no, because if you have their totem, you can't eat them. So I was like, wow, this is amazing that they, for Africans, animals are, they are part of the community, which, you know, I've never heard from, especially from my Asian culture, saying, oh, they are part of the community. Like he was saying, oh, there's a big python under that tree. And I was like, yikes. He said, oh, he's part of the community. He won't say anything to you. So I think we need to instill this into our children who only go to like zoos and find animals and just see. In fact, that's also disappearing. It's all like stuffed animals, and you know, love the stuffed animals because you will only see them stuffed and not real. So thank you so much. I think this was lovely having this chat and amazing work you're doing. And as you rightly said, that I wanted to also see and showcase that this is in practice happening, not just theory about what Quran says and his animal rights in Islam, or the holistic Tayyib way of living. This is how it's been actually showcased here. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wow, that was amazing. Okay, so you were talking about not theorizing too much and living the Tayyib or Halal way of life and practicing everything. And you were telling me about 3 principles.
Well, yes, because we like to keep things reasonably simple. It's very much an experiential visit when people come to the farm, and we do have lots of families. So we hope they're taking away a message, and we want to make that easy for them. They experience it, they feel inspired, they see the interaction with nature, but we then try and drum into them at least 3 principles. One obviously is what brought them here, probably, was their food and where it comes from. So they see natural production, the healthy animals, the interaction with the environment, and the broader sort of symbiosis of all the biodiversity living alongside the food production. And how we utilise that and how we make use of every part of it. But then we extend it to saying, well, also you've got to audit the energy that you're using, how you're actually producing that food and how you're living on the land. So we live in this building, which is actually an earthen building, very natural, simple building, literally dug from the ground and constructed by our own hands. It's a very eco building. It keeps the heat inside. We generate all the heat by using the timber that we're producing on the farm, which is by managing the woodland. We planted about 5,000 trees, so we're now harvesting and managing the woodland without cutting down trees, but just by managing it, providing a lot of the timber that produces the heat energy. We have solar panels producing electricity on the farm, about 24 kilowatts are being produced. We have a small wind turbine. So looking at the energy that we use, we're now using electric vehicles that we charge off our own roof. So trying to audit that side of our livelihood. And in terms of
The third principle,
which is the waste that we generate, another thing that we need to address, we try and signify really what you can be doing in terms of recycling. We reuse as much as we can on the farm. We even actually have compost toilets across the farm, not just recycling our own waste, but anyone that visits the farm, everything they leave with us, we recycle that for them, as well as, of course, composting manures and various things from the animals. So I think it's crucial to simplify and to say, well, just look at what you're eating, where does it come from? Look at your energy use, how you can adapt and change and reduce and possibly use other forms of transport. And look to different ways that you can reduce waste or compost or recycle. And those are 3 very practical ways that our customers leave the farm and they go away inspired to do something, can actually put those things into practice in their own lives. So we feel very much it's key to us to be doing rather than talking at this stage. I think it's important people go over the clear message and actually make some impact in their lives, inshallah.
And that's the message we are taking with us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time. And for
Open once the weather improves. I mean, it's been a long, cold winter and
I
spring.
know.
The
And
winter,
rainy
the
as
winter
well.
wasn't so bad, but yeah, the
Yeah.
spring has just continued
rain,
and
I
continued.
think it has rained phenomenally this
I know.
year.
Yeah, we
I'm
haven't-
coming from Glasgow and it doesn't stop raining at all.
We haven't had a year as wet as this. This is probably
Yes.
the wettest in the 22 years we've been
Yes.
here.
I
And it
think there's a lot of
represents,
flooding. Okay, so this is where you rear the sheep and no, it's
These
like
are the goats.
goats.
The sheep and everything are down in the lower fields, but there's some lambs here. These are actually some of the lambs that were bottle fed this year.
Oh, okay.
So they're ones who had problems. These were actually triplets.
Oh, triplets, wow, cute.
They're 3 sets of triplets, so they're each the third of 3. And usually the mother struggles a bit when she has too many. So come here, guys.
Aww. I don't want to touch them.
No,
in case
okay. They're fine.
I don't want to give them my disease or something. Aww. Mashallah.
But the rest of the sheep are all down on the other side.
So when did you start this?
The whole farm? Gosh,
Yes.
21 years ago now. I think this is. I think we
21 years ago.
We started maybe this is the 22nd year now. but
Mashallah.
The years flick past.
Yes.
But when we started, there were no trees on the farm, so all the trees that you see are
Right.
22 years old
Right.
because they've all been planted about
So
5,000
this was just a plain
trees.
field at that
Yes.
time. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you heard about Sechem in Egypt?
No.
No? Okay. So Sechem is a farm which it's actually an oasis in desert. And Dr. Ibrahim Abulish stood in that desert and he envisioned that there's going to be a garden. And I can share the link with you.
Yeah, that'd be
Sechem
nice to
is
see.
like phenomenal. They have something like this but on a larger, bigger scale.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. Anika Ruby.
Very nice
to
to meet
meet
you. I've
you.
met you before, but about 4
It
years
was a
ago.
while ago. She
Okay.
volunteered for
Oh, good.
Well,
just for one day, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
I came with my friend Huma Beg. I don't know. You get so many visitors.
sure.
so
We do. We
yeah.
get lots of people, obviously. Yeah. So they wanted to do a sit-down interview, I think, which we could do. Even nicer to just do it in a house, really. I think we're doing that. But maybe if you want they want some shots walking around.
Yeah,
So-
I'm gonna go through the lab.
Shall we come with you and do that? We can do
Yeah,
a
why
bit
don't
of
you do
talking.
that?
Yeah.